Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. This is NFA Live, or Not Financial Advice Live. We do this every Friday. We have Guy from Coin Bureau down at the bottom. How's it going?
Good, thanks, Ben. How are you doing?
Pretty good. And then we have Rob from Digital Asset News, who, as always, looks like he wants to jump in the pool behind him, but hasn't done so yet.
It's because it's a green screen. That's very hard to jump into a green screen.
Well, we got a lot to talk about, and a lot of things we can discuss today. So basically, we're going to talk about some of the things that Rob kind of warned about a year ago. We're going to touch on that. We're going to touch on some of the things that have been happening with all these exchanges. We'll talk a little bit about some of these price predictions that have been put out recently by some of these, larger institutions. We'll talk a little bit about, principles, investing principles, sort of stick to over the next couple of years, and then we'll talk about the best investment that they've made. So let's go ahead and jump in. Rob, I don't know if I'm sure you remember, but if in case the audience doesn't remember, a while back, when it was clear that that all the regulatory bodies were coming after all these crypto companies, Rob was like, Rob was talking about, hey guys, we all need to collectively go on the offensive, or they're going to pick us off one by one, right? And it kind of seems like, that was a good call, because we didn't really go after them on the offensive. And now it just seems like every single week there's something coming out, whether it's against Binance or Kraken or, whoever, right? Like every single week, it seems like there's something new coming out. So I'm curious, Rob, like, where does this all end? And I'd like to get your opinion. Like, are all the exchanges that we're using today, or the ones that we've been using, are they going to become a thing of the past, or do you think that they'll survive and still compete with the larger players that are coming into the space?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I don't think that all the exchanges are going to go away, but I think the ones that are going to play ball with the United States government are the ones that are going to stick around. I know some people would say, like, well, why would these exchanges have to do that? Well, just look at what happened with Binance. They bent the knee it took a while, but they bent the knee. And that is the largest crypto exchange out there globally. And now they're the ones where the US government has their tentacles in there at every single space and walk that they actually have. And I think I just heard a report that they're going to discontinue the Binance stablecoin. And you better believe that wasn't because they want to do that. That's because they were forced to do that. So that is the first part. And when I talked about this before, about, hey, we should all band together, we should do these things, it was something that Benjamin Franklin said. I mean, in our days of creating this great country, the United States, he said, we must stand together, or we should all hang together, or we will surely hang separately. And essentially, that's what it happens. There is strength in numbers, right? It's the old adage of you can break one stick, but if you put together 30, 40, 50 sticks together, you can't break them. It's just too hard. And I said this, and to me, it just made sense, because let's be honest, the American government's a bully. Let's call a spade. They are. And the only way that you get rid of bullies is you have to punch them in the face as hard as you possibly can, so they don't come back. And it has to be done, pretty quickly. But I understand why they didn't do it, because the business as usual, it worked pretty well for Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan and Wells Fargo and all the different banks that are out there. Let's just play ball. Let's just pay the fine and move forward. Well, Kraken did that. They paid the fine and moved forward. And what happened? They got sued again, and they got sued again. So this, to me, is a shakedown. And this is exactly what happens with mafioso types. I'm not saying that they are the mafia, but they sure do like those tactics to use them. And they will keep coming and coming until we stand up to them and say, no, this is what the people really want, and we need to move forward in this way, not with what you want to do. So that was the whole thesis, and let's see what happens in the future. But to reiterate, I don't think the exchanges are going away. I mean, some might go away in the United States, but that's the great thing about Bitcoin and crypto and digital assets. It's a global currency. It's a global effort, and it'll never go away, and they can't stop it.
Yeah, it's an important reminder. I think a lot of people in the United States sort of see all this, and it's kind of depressing. But then you go other places, and doesn't really seem like it's nearly sort of the same outlook on crypto as it has been in the United States. Guy, I'm sure you could speak to that some. I think where you are, it's probably a bit more pro crypto than it is where I am.
Yeah, much more pro crypto. At the moment, there seems to be stuff happening kind of almost every single day. I mean, we've got Abu Dhabi Finance Week is happening just down the road from where I am now. So, there's a lot happening, in the sort of finance and blockchain and crypto worlds in this part of the world at the moment. And elsewhere as well. I think picking up on what you were saying, Rob, about the industry sort of hanging together, fighting together. We have, I think, seen a bit of pushback, especially in other jurisdictions. I think a good example is MiCA in the EU. The first draft of that was not great, from a crypto industry point of view. The second draft was a lot better. And I think it's generally accepted that Circle, among others, had quite a big say in how that second draft came into being. Yeah. So I think we are seeing pushback from the industry, and an example from the United States. I think it was it Coinbase that came in on Ripple's side in its case against the SEC. I think we saw an example of that a few months ago. And then we have got, there are lobbyists. I think crypto is becoming increasingly good and increasingly sort of more well-resourced when it comes to lobbying. So I think, I agree with you 100%, Rob. The industry needs to come together, and I think a lot of the infighting that we see is so unhelpful. But I do get the impression that perhaps behind the scenes a little bit, away from crypto Twitter and places like this, I think there is a lot more kind of pragmatism going on. I think there is probably a lot more cooperation that we maybe don't see. And I think the results of that are becoming quite apparent. A good example, I think, is everything that's happened with Binance recently, because I think there's a really interesting parallel to draw between CZ and Richard Teng, who's just taken his place. CZ is a software developer. That's what he started doing. That was his thing. He built trading systems, and then he went to work for OKCoin, and then founded Binance, and obviously took that to where it to number one. But he was a software guy. He was a builder, really, and kind of found himself in this position of being CEO of Binance, a big sort of spokesman for the industry. And then you compare him with Richard Teng. Richard's a sort of career civil servant. He's got years of experience working with regulators. He's much more of that world, if you like. And I think, the Binance of just a few weeks ago and the Binance of now are very different. Now, obviously that change has been kind of forced upon them, but I think it's still an interesting picture, and I think that is how we are going to see exchanges move forward. They are going to become, I think any exchange that wants to survive and thrive, as Rob said, is going to have to bend the knee. So exchanges are going to have to do, I think, there are going to be a lot of jobs in compliance departments going, I think. Exchanges are going to have to spend huge amounts of money and resources on compliance, complying with US regulations, complying with regulations in other jurisdictions as well that are influenced by the US. The ones that survive will have to do that. And I think what we could end up with is a situation a bit like we've got in South Korea now, because South Korea has gone really heavy on regulation. And there it is, it's quite difficult to do things like move crypto on and off of exchanges. All wallets are sort of requiring KYC. There are potential premiums, I think, on certain coins and tokens in certain markets. It's very, very restricted there. And unfortunately, I think that's probably a harbinger of how things are going to be elsewhere in the future, because regulation is coming, and that will be a good thing in a way. But yeah, a lot is going to change. And I guess for those of us who've been in crypto for a few years and remember what it was like. There is going to be a sense of having lost something, I think, as a result of all that. So, but that's just the way it's going. I don't think we can. I don't know how much we can fight that. I think all we can really fight for as an industry is to try and be in the room when these regulatory decisions are made, so that they're not completely insane, and we then have to spend years lobbying for them to be changed, which I think is another thing that will probably pan out. So yeah, but I do think the industry is kind of pulling together, but we can always see more of that, definitely.
Do you think that today, these days, these will be the good old days in the future?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, isn't it interesting, because like we're on the cusp of ETFs in a way? Isn't that the industry sort of? But isn't that a great reply to everything that these regulators and stuff have said over the years? Now we have some of crypto's biggest critics of the past coming back and going, oh, actually, if we could have a spot Bitcoin ETF, that would be just great. That's what our customers want. So yeah, and I think, I mean, another interesting thing to consider is what's going to happen in terms of exchanges. What's going to happen when all these ETFs are finally approved? Are we going to see a lot of, let's say, Bitcoin's trading volume? Is that going to go? Is that going to become more done through these ETF providers? Are exchanges still going to have a big cut of that? So that could be interesting. Yeah, I mean, dare I say it? These could be the good old days, as you say, Ben.
Yeah, it never feels like it when you're in them, but then later it always seems like they were. Yeah.
Yeah.
We got a big year coming up next year. We got not only the halving, we have elections. That's always relevant in the sense that markets aren't too fond of uncertainty. In fact, like pre-election years, I think are on average the best for the stock market, just because you don't have elections, right? It's not even the midterms. The market just trends higher, but in election years, there is more uncertainty. But again, we also have the halving for Bitcoin, which historically we know what has happened. Normally in the past, it's been a good thing for Bitcoin. We also have potentially a Fed pivot next year. After all this higher for longer stuff, perhaps they'll start to cut next year, maybe because of the elections. I think there will be some political pressure there. So how do you guys see next year going? I mean, if you could look into your crystal ball, and I'm not necessarily saying to like make price predictions or anything like that, but like what do you generally see happening next year, and what are some events you're prepared to try and navigate?
Guy can take that one.
Okay. I think that the first quarter of next year is just shaping up to be potentially absolutely wild. And I must say, like, this has surprised me a lot, seeing this coming. But like, the ETFs have kind of changed everything really in the last few months. So potentially we see ETFs approval in January. That is going to be rocket fuel for the market. Maybe not quite what everyone thinks. It could be a sell the news event, but long term, that is going to bring a lot of liquidity into the market. I think that's a generally sort of agreed upon view. And then February and March, we've got. I don't know how relevant these are going to be to the overall thing. February is when CZ gets sentenced for what he's pleaded guilty to. And March, much more seriously, is when SBF gets sentenced. And I do wonder, I look at this, I'm trying to look at this from an outsider's point of view. I do wonder whether SBF sentencing could be a moment of closure of this just really grim chapter in crypto. And I do wonder whether that could be a moment where people from the outside look in and go, crypto is cleaning up its act. This guy, he stole all this money, he did all these things, and now he's been locked up, we imagine, for a very long time. And so I do hope that is a moment where, we can sort of move on from everything that SBF was responsible for. And then, of course, that brings us into April and the halving. And I think the halving is a really easy narrative for non-crypto people to understand. The supply, the new issuance, the inflation rate gets cut in half. And I think that's something I remember the media really picked up on that. The non-crypto media really picked up on that in the last cycle. And that helped fuel it. That helped get people interested. And then, of course, as you said, Ben, that could coincide with a Fed pivot, which is being talked about more and more. It does seem like they're done raising rates. Interest rate futures. I mean, the CME I don't think is right all of the time, but certainly there is a lot of people think that by the May meeting, we could interest rates could have started coming down. And I think when you tie all those together, I mean, that's just the first 4 or 5 months. That's pretty wild. So I think it's got a lot of potential to be a pretty crazy year.
Rob, what do you think? Are you think it's going to pretty much go how Guy said? I mean, I know you've talked before about the whole ETF stuff not happening in 2023.
Yeah. I mean, I talk about it here. I'm going to show you something, and this is for everybody because we're going to see a bunch of different information going to be inundated. And this is what I talked about yesterday on the show. And it's about the macro and hard landing and soft landing. This is from Business Insider. And it talks about how the economy is going to go down 27%, and we're going to have a pretty hard landing. It's going to be awful. On that same docket, on that same website, on the same day, they also put this out. So it's one of these things where it's like you're going to see all these different information. You're like, well, which one is it? Which one's going on? And no one really knows for sure. But I will say the timing is perfect if you think about it. And just I'm going to piggyback on what Guy said and what you said, Ben. If we look at the FOMC and we talk about when the Fed's going to actually cut or they're going to pivot, usually when they pivot, you're going to see within 2 or 3 months, because we rally into a recession like we talk about. If that happens in, let's say, April, May, June, somewhere around there, right? When the first cut will happen. And let's say we get into this mini recession, or maybe even a hard recession. Recessions on average last about 10 months. So if we have 10 months and then we go into when? 2025. And if we do that in May, so when does that happen? We're looking at February, March. And this would be a perfect timing as everything kind of comes out and then we get into this massive bull run. And on top of that, just because the recession goes 10 months doesn't mean that the recession is for the markets. That's just for the basic economy. The actual market recovers way sooner than the actual recession gets done. So you're looking at maybe 6 to 7 months. So all these things that are going on, me personally, I'm kind of hoping for this to actually happen and go down. Because I don't know about you guys, but when I look at my DCA, which I have to use Coinbase because I'm stuck in America, I look at the prices and I'm like, man, I'm paying a lot of money for these Bitcoin, and I'm paying a lot of money for Solana. I'm paying a lot of money for Render. I'm paying money. And I look at this and I'm like, I would like it to go down a little bit. Now, if it doesn't, it doesn't. But either way it happens, I think I know in the general grand scheme of things, and I think you guys could agree with me that over time, we're going to be pretty well. I just don't know if it's going to be 2024, 2025, but I've got things are looking up on the horizon. I don't care if it's a recession or not. I'm hoping for it, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say exactly when that stuff will play out. I saw, I mean, some of the macro stuff looks more optimistic, and then other macro things look pretty bad.
It looks heavy, and then like you talked about this before, Dave Lynn's channel. On Dave Lynn's channel, I love it because one day you'll have an expert will say it's going to crash and it's going to be the worst. It's going to be a Great Depression, and the next couple of days, someone will say it's going to be not even a soft landing. It's going to be awesome. So these are the experts. That's what I see.
Yeah, I mean, I follow a lot of people who are much smarter than me in the macro space, and I don't think any of them agree on anything.
True.
I mean, there's so many different ways that you could sort of interpret it. Next thing. So, Rob, this question is sort of inspired by something you had posted. Standard Chartered had recently put out a.
That was pretty funny.
Yeah. I just remember because Standard Chartered put out a price prediction recently saying that Bitcoin's going to 100K next year, I think.
Yeah.
So it's funny when you sort of juxtapose, when you put them next to each other, right? When you have one price prediction at the end of 2023, where Standard Chartered is saying Bitcoin's going to 100K. And then at the end of 2022, exactly a year ago, Standard Chartered said Bitcoin was going to go to 5K in 2023. Yeah. So I guess the question is like, is this just, larger institutions sort of also falling victim to putting out price predictions based on most recent price action and not anticipating, future price action? Is it, could you see it being like they were putting out bad price predictions and they were actually trying to acquire some type of position in the cryptoverse? I'm just curious how you think about that, because these extreme price predictions tend to often occur near extremes.
Well, I mean, first of all, they should start, like I said, they should start a YouTube channel, because price predictions that are extreme do so fantastic. And then it could help with the social risk, which would bring it up on your website. And maybe we could definitely say this is definitely a bull market. I always look at it like when I see these big institutions making these predictions, I'm like, what's your position? Because I know you're not doing this out of the goodness of your heart. I think there's always something behind it, and people will say, follow the money. I always remember also, there's a couple of people like Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank. He comes out and he talked about forever how awful Bitcoin was and it's never going to go anywhere. And then he was called out on MSNBC because he said, "Oh no, 8 months ago, we 18 months ago we got into it." And they're like, "Just 16 months ago, you had this press conference where you said Bitcoin is going to zero." He goes, "So which one is it?" He's like, blah, 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 blah. So there's that. I also remember, and then Larry Fink, I mean, the head of BlackRock, he's forever came out and said, "Hey, we talked to our institutional investors, we talked to our clients, and there is zero demand whatsoever for Bitcoin and crypto and digital assets." And all of a sudden, like 6 months later, it's like, well, I guess we're going to do a spot ETF. And you're telling me that a big, large organization like that with 10 trillion assets under management just out of a whim says, let's do a spot ETF? You are kidding me. So when I take a look at these, that's why I was glad you posted that, because it was pretty funny. I was like, oh yeah, these guys are like everybody else. They're just pushing narratives.
I think it's just sort of the same thing. Like, I think a lot of times we think that like institutions and stuff, have more insight into where price is going to go. But I mean, a year ago, it was 5K Bitcoin, and today it's 100K. And the only thing that changed is Bitcoin went up 2x since then.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I congratulate everybody who's bought Bitcoin before, because in all honesty, you guys who are watching the video, you just front ran everybody. So congratulations.
Guy, what do you think? I mean, I know you didn't post that thing, but I mean, what's your views on these institutions sort of do you think they're more so just riding the momentum in the whatever way it's going, or are there any ulterior motives?
I don't think they necessarily know much more than most of the rest of us do. I think, understanding crypto is still very new, and understanding how to value it is still very new. I mean, there was a recent study done by Glassnode and ARK Invest that basically said, a lot of the way that we're analyzing Bitcoin on chain, it's not necessarily, we're only just really starting to understand how to do that. There's new tools all the time. It's not an exact science, and perhaps never will be. So I think, these institutions are trying to, they kind of got the same data that we have, or that, a lot of us in crypto have, if we're prepared to go looking for it. So they don't really, I think, know all that much better than we do. When it comes to putting these price predictions out there, I mean, I guess for them it's the same. It's the headline, isn't it? The people just can't help themselves. They just want to click on an article that says BTC to 5K in 2023 or BTC to 100K in 2024. They know people want to read it. I guess if you stick a prediction in there, ideally one that's kind of pretty outlandish one way or another, then you're much more then people are much more likely to read your work. And obviously that's the important part behind any of these predictions, is the analysis, is their working as to how they've arrived at these figures. And of course, I think they're usually pretty careful to sort of hedge their bets and say, well, because that 5K one, I think, if I remember, the Standard Chartered one, I mean, I think that was a real worst case scenario, and that was in the aftermath. We were still sort of sifting through the rubble of FTX and Alameda then, so that was a pretty bad time. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a headline as much as anything else. It's like, hey, look at what we've written. This is what we think. But in order to grab your attention among all the other articles, yeah, sure, 100K next year. Why not?
Why not?
Why not?
That makes sense.
Why not put out the nice price predictions when price is moving in that direction, right?
Yeah.
Rob, I know we'll talk about it with both you guys, but we were talking this before the show. Some is, what principles are you going to apply in your investing strategy over the next couple of years that's different from 2020, 2021? I know, Rob, we were talking about this before the show, so why don't you go ahead and say, like, how are you going to play this differently than last time?
I did it perfectly last time. I don't even change anything. This is the same thing we talked about last week, I think. But yeah, this one's a little bit different because last time I just kind of I put together. I said I think this is where the prices are going based on fractals. So I took a look at Bitcoin. At first I thought 150K, then I said 100K. And Cardano, at first I thought like around $5, and I said around maybe $3. And that's like the one I actually got right. And then other ones, EOS and Ethereum and Theta, they were just wrong. So this one, I try to take a look at and really hold tight to a plan. And the plan is, of course, you have to create a plan now, because if you create a plan when you're in battle, it usually doesn't work out for you too well. So you have to do it now when things are most sane. So my plan is pretty simple. It's just to take a look at some different indicators. I'm going to steal as much information as I possibly can off of Ben's site. And then also, there's a lot of different ones I like to use, like the Pi Cycle Top and the MVRVZ score and the 12 multiple. And then also you can extrapolate that from Bitcoin. You can also put those into altcoins, and you kind of use those to say where is roughly the top, or where are we going. Now here's the thing: I accept the fact that I will not hit the top. I accept the fact that if I get around 60% of the top, I'll be extremely happy. And I know that I have to sell roughly 80%. Because if I don't, I'm going to do what I did on 2017, which is write everything up and then write the things back down. And in 2021, I did a little better, but not as good as I should. So the big thing is to have the plan, make sure I stick to it, and then execute. And that's it, essentially. And there's a video that I put in my description of all my videos where I say this is how I'm going to sell 80% of my Bitcoin and crypto and moving on from there. Yeah,
Brad,
that's
what about
it.
you?
Yeah, I think the thing I really want to do differently this time around is I want to be less sentimental about my holdings. Like last cycle, I bought some projects that I thought were really great, had great tech, great teams, great fundamentals, all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I held them and I held them and I held them, and in some cases I'm still holding them. And it's like, I think because I allowed myself to get sort of sentimental, it's like, no, this is a great project. I believe in it. It will come back. And some of them just ain't going to do that. Mm. So this time I want to be focused more on taking profits. I still think there's a case for diamond handing certain assets. Like Bitcoin, I intend to hold for the long term. That hasn't changed. Ditto ETH to a great extent. Everything else, I think, much more fair game. I want to take more profits. I want to be less diamond-handed. I want to be, I think, as well, a bit more cynical. I was a bit last time around. I was like, okay, I love this project. I love this project. I don't like that project so much because of this. I don't like the fundamentals. I don't like what it stands for, et cetera, et cetera. This time, I don't care. If I think it's going to go up, I'm going to buy it. But not every single, because I can't. I don't want to spread myself too thin. I don't want to have a massive portfolio that I can't keep track of. But I will be asking myself that question first and foremost. Do I think this project will go up? If the answer is yes, then I will buy it, even if I don't maybe like what it does or stands for, or maybe even if I don't like some of the fundamentals. I will consider it if I think, for instance, it fits a narrative. Then, it's all on the table. So, yeah. Less sentimental, a bit more cynical, and just a bit more ruthless when it comes to taking profits, I think.
Yeah, both sound reasonable. I think it's hard, like coming up with a plan, or it's hard coming up with a plan in the moment, right? But if you come up with a plan ahead of time, it can be easier to follow it. Last question, and then maybe we'll take one or two questions from the audience, and then we'll wrap it up. We're probably gonna wrap it up a little bit early this time because I gotta get somewhere. What's been your best investment? You know, I mean, I know we've all made all sorts of good investments and bad investments over the years, but I'm curious, what has been your best investment, Guy?
Bitcoin, first and foremost. I bought Bitcoin a long time ago, and I've held it, and I know it's going to be an even better investment going into the future. So that's definitely one. A good investment was my flat in London. My wife, who was then my girlfriend, and we bought that a few years ago, and we got, not only has it now gone up in value, so it's been a good investment in that sense, but we get rental income from it now, and we loved it. We were really happy there. And we always say, like, we loved it when we saw it and we bought it and never ever regretted it. And I think, in terms of everything it's brought to us beyond money, it's been a great investment, because the sense of security that it gave us of having a place that was ours, of not paying absolutely extortionate rental prices in London, all these things tie up. It's like, we knew it was a good investment. We knew it was right to do it. And so it's proved. And again, like, it's something we'll hold. I've said, we'll hold on to it till the cows come home, because it's just, I think it's one of those things that it will just keep being valuable.
Yeah.
Well said.
Rob, what about you?
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on what Guy said. Crypto has been a massive asymmetrical return. I mean, it's just huge, and there's nothing else out there that's going to give you those types of returns. Even as much real estate or different businesses that we've done, it's been crypto. It's been the big one. But the best investment, the most important investment I've made so far is my wife. And everybody out there is watching the video. If you've you know what I'm talking about, especially those who have unfortunately may have gone through a divorce and things like that. The person that you stand next to is the most important person that will either lift you up or tear you down. And that has been by far the best investment I've ever done. And so besides, and I'm definitely going to clip this and then show my wife. But yeah, but the crypto has been great. But of course, the wife's been the most.
I don't know how anyone's going to top that.
It's very tough. I'm glad Guy went first, so I can one up him.
Can I just add? My wife was an excellent investment as well.
There you go.
I don't think she's listening.
But only after the flat, right?
Yeah, wife or flat, don't make me choose.
All right. Oh, good one, Guy. Good recovery. Excellent.
All right, guys. Do we have any questions before we get going? Any questions in the chat? We'll just see if anyone has anything.
We'll hear what Guy or Ben. I got one for you. We answered the question about what's your plan for selling. For us, how are you going to do things differently this year yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think last time I sold most of my stuff into the first peak, and then I accumulated some in the summer.
Yeah.
And then I didn't sell nearly as much into the second peak because I thought it was going to go higher. And it took me until Q1 to kind of recognize that. So I think for me, this time, whenever Bitcoin hits the highest risk levels, I'm not going to assume it's going to go back to the highest risk levels again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because I think that's kind of what got a lot of people offsides last time is sort of the first peak happened a lot sooner than anyone was expecting, Yeah. And then the second, it's funny because we always say this time is different, but we've had a major peak at the end of 2021 and the end of 2017 and the end of 2013. Is this time going to be different, or is the end of 2025 when it's going to be again?
And you know what's funny is the video that I did, I actually referenced you because you did a Pi Cycle Top video in April of 2021. And you did that video and I watched, I'm like, maybe I should sell some. Nah, it's going to keep going higher. That was when Bitcoin was at 56, 57,000. And it did go to 67, but still, if you would have sold most of it, it still would have been pretty damn good.
Yeah, I think I sold 87% of my Bitcoin into that first top and was waiting for a pullback, and we got it. So I bought back in, and it went up, right? It went up. It went the way I wanted, but it didn't keep going the way I wanted.
Never does.
Yeah, it's funny because I think at the time we were all a lot of us were all convinced oh, it's different. It's going to be different. And here we are. I guess my best investment was buying Bitcoin dominance at 38, 39%. That's all the way up.
Hey man, when you make that next Bitcoin dominance video, that's 2 hours. I'm waiting for that.
We'll
one.
be there.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is converting alts to Bitcoin, and
Okay.
converting my ETH to Bitcoin, all that sort of stuff. It's worked out well so far. We'll see if it continues to work out. But by the way, it just I need to get ahead of this now because I know it's going to change soon. So dominance normally doesn't go too much higher in the halving year. So just got to keep that in mind. Like at least historically, doesn't mean it can't this time, but historically, most of the move comes in the bear market year and the pre-halving year, and then the halving year it tends to only go a few percent, maybe a couple percent higher. So I think that'll be relevant to think about next year.
Excellent.
All right, guys, let's see if there's any questions.
A lot of talk about wives in the comments.
Yeah, I know everyone's talking about that.
See, it was a great. That was one of my best answers, I think, so far.
It was beautiful, Rob.
That one, and the one that you asked us, Guy, where you said if you could have dinner with 4 people, who would it be? And I said, oh, that's easy. It'd be SBF, Alex Mashinsky. It'd be the guys from 3 Arrows Capital. and Gary Gensler, so I could sit there and be the waiter and listen to them, accuse each other of shenanigans.
Poison their coffee.
Yeah,
all right.
exactly.
This person wants to know: will we get a big dip before the halving? I guess the question is like we don't. I mean, no one knows, but like if there is a big dip, what would be the narrative that would accompany such a dip?
That's a Guy question.
Maybe like spot ETF rejection. Recession.
Yeah.
Recession would probably be one.
Or you know what would be like? What if it was? Well, yeah, like the ETF gets rejected on January. That means ARK's out. But then in March, they could approve BlackRock and Fidelity and the rest of them. I doubt that would happen. If they're going to not approve them on January, they probably won't approve them on March, I guess.
Yeah.
But other than that, a recession, I guess.
Well, you know what? It could be you get the SPY ETF, and then there's just not nearly as much demand as you think because of a recession, right? Like something like that could happen. I don't know. I mean, the whole recession stuff is hard to predict. Continued claims, by the way, came in this morning. They went up a lot. I don't know if you guys. I know you guys are following claims, right? But if you look at continued claims are up. Yeah, to 1.93 million. So they went up 86,000 this past week. Pretty big jump in a single week. But not actually that different from what it was a few weeks ago in terms of the percentage change, but it's still moving higher. So I think those are probably the main things, right? Like if a spot ETF is denied or if it's approved and not nearly as much demand as people think. Wasn't there this whole thing with Ethereum not too long ago, like the futures or the CME or something, and then like it just kind of came and went and nothing really came of it?
It was a real damp squib. Like it completely flopped. The inflows were, I mean, virtually nothing.
Right.
So there is that chance. And I mean, I think we've got to be prepared for the fact that the SEC might still rug us. I'm sure nothing would give them greater pleasure. So I think that's something we should definitely be on the lookout for. By the way, what has the PCE just come out? Is that today?
It is today. Yeah. I think it came out earlier though. I can go look.
Right.
But,
I don't know.
But because that would be interesting to see where that's coming in. I don't know. I don't see it right off. Here it is. It falls to 3%. Right. So PCE inflation falls to 3%. Core PCE inflation fell to 3.5.
Okay.
You
see that?
How's that being reflected in the charts? I wonder.
Let me.
I also saw that the GDP got revised. It went from 4.9 up to 5.2, which is a pretty big jump.
Yeah.
Well, Bitcoin's not doing anything on that news.
Then who cares? Then it's worthless news. I don't care about traditional markets. Yeah. But I should, because of course there's a little overlap.
Yeah, it looks like core PCE came in at 3.5, but the consensus was 3.5. I think the general thing is that the directionality of it, because last month it was at 3.7. The month before that it was like 3.85. The month before that it was like almost 4.3. So it's still trending down. I think the sweet spot, or the hard thing for the Fed here, is going to be like, they're gonna, I mean, in order to engineer a soft landing, they have to cut before it's too late, and then you go into a deflationary spiral, right? And that's going to be difficult to manufacture potentially. Which is why I think the Fed could start cutting a lot sooner than maybe people think they will.
Yeah, but maybe they don't want to make the same mistake Volcker did, like we talked about before in the 70s.
That's true. We'll see. I think like I think you're generally right. I don't think they want to. I also wonder, with it being an election year, there will probably be a bit more pressure politically to
what? In America? I don't know. All right.
No, it's crazy.
That's all going to be pretty. That's all going to get pretty interesting towards the end of next year, isn't it? I mean, we were talking about sort of early next year. That's going to be interesting enough. But yeah, once the election gets going, once you guys get into all that, that's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. No one, of course, we don't beat Parliament though. I mean, as far as like our back and forth, nothing as good as that.
We will. I'll be watching from what I hope is the relative safety of the UAE. With
see, guys got it right.
See what goes down.
So if the SEC were to reject the spot ETF, do you think it would be, what does it say, go home, or would they come back? Oh, basically saying like, do you think they would just come back with a reason and then ask for improvements, or would it just be like, no, get this out of here, we don't want to look at this?
I mean, I guess you would have to give BlackRock, the likes of BlackRock, a pretty good reason, wouldn't you? Because I mean, that was, this ETF thing has taken up so much bandwidth, hasn't it? But I mean, I guess, we've been talking about spot ETFs for Bitcoin the Winklevoss twins filed the first application 10 years ago, didn't they? It's been a thing for a long time, but when BlackRock came in, that's what really supercharged it, because everyone was like, well, you don't say no to BlackRock. Like, BlackRock gets what BlackRock wants. So, I mean, I think it's a good question. Like, what would a rejection look like? But I think it would only be, I think it's for the SEC, I guess from their point of view, it's like, well, if they do want to reject it, they're going to have a good reason, and they're just going to come back. All these asset managers are going to come back. It's like, all right, well, okay, tell us what we need to do. Okay, well, we'll go and fix that, and here's our application again. So, I do think it is a matter of, it's a matter of when, not if.
True.
But yeah, I mean, I guess maybe the thinking inside the SEC will be like, look, if everything's in the right place, and everything that's happened with Binance, Binance was a big thing hanging over it. Now that has been got past, it's, I guess you could say Tether is something that's still worrying them, but like, I don't know. It just gets harder and harder to imagine why they would reject it, and they can't do it forever.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys saw MicroStrategy bought another 16,130 Bitcoin at an average price of 36,785.
That's how you DCA right there. Wow. Good for them.
It's Michael Saylor's world. We're just living in it.
Nah, this is going to be all over X. Good quote, guy.
We're just the pawns. We're just the pawns in a bigger game.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Praise be to Michael.
Here's an interesting question. For the sake of argument, could you take the side of the SEC on the ETF issue? What does he mean? Like, if you're
play devil's advocate, why would they say
why won't it be approved or something?
Yeah, why won't it be approved? The only way that you could say that is Gary could come back and say, look, we're worried about market manipulation. And that was one of the bigger things. Yeah. But with them taking now Binance, the largest centralized exchange in the globe, they kind of put a kaput on that. And that's why they're really putting the clamps down, I think. So for them to manipulate the price, you can't manipulate Bitcoin because of how decentralized it is, but you can manipulate the price. And Sam Bankman-Fried did that quite a bit. We can see that. But on the other, I don't see how they could, unless they're just like sorry, that's it. It's even me. I'm kind of like starting to see like it looks pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, they are going after a lot of exchanges. So I guess if they found some type of fraud that hadn't previously been uncovered somewhere, then that would be sort of a reason, right? I mean, it's hard to know. I mean, and again, like it's, before FTX collapsed, I'm not saying no one was predicting it, but it's not like most people assumed that SBF had been going to the extent that he was. And it's not like that was it caught a lot of people by surprise. So we have to remember that like things like that can happen. And if there is a big fallout like that again, then you have to imagine it would delay a spot ETF, right? I mean, again, like they're probably going to approve it in 2024, but the question is to play devil's advocate, right? If a big fraud or something were ousted between now and in early 2024, then I imagine that would throw a wrench in the plans of getting it approved.
Yeah, that's why I think this next bull run is going to be the real bull run. I think the last one was manipulated. It was just odd. This one, there's not a lot of people. There's not the 3 ACs and the FTX in the background screwing things up and supposedly buying Bitcoin but not buying Bitcoin and then commingling. And so we'll see.
Yeah.
All right.
It's different institutions this time around.
Yeah.
This time is different, right?
On that note, nice, man.
And on that note,
good stuff.
All right, guys. I got to get going, so we're gonna cut it short. If you guys are not subscribed to Guy or Rob, go do so. Links to their sorry, the dog ran through my backyard. Links to their stuff, links to their YouTube in the description below. So check that out. Guy also they recently launched a service. Make sure you guys check that out. What's the link to it, Guy?
It is hub.coinbureau.com. It's our new altcoin focused subscription service. So yeah, Coin Bureau Club it's called. Check it out if you're interested.
Check out Coin Bureau Club. They do a lot of great stuff there, and I think it's cool to see people kind of stick around for the long haul. And I've seen some people sort of pop back up now that prices have started to move back up, but we'll see.
Welcome back. We've kept it warm for you.
and if prices were to drop again, they'll just disappear again. Anyways,
Exactly
guys,
right.
we're gonna wrap it up, and we will see you guys next week on Rob's channel, I believe.
Yeah, sounds good, guys.
All right, see you guys.
Awesome.
Bye.
Oh, it'll be Jessica next week, I think. I'm going to be flying to the UK, so
All right, sounds good.
yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Good. That's way better. All right, I'll see you guys.
Cheers, guys.